If you were like me when you started your printing journey, whether it be resin or FDM, you probably didn't have a clue what to do. You were maybe interested, maybe you were a hobbyist or modeler. You saw the plethora of options and you were just staggered by the confusion. Well, maybe not staggered. It definitely took me some learning and there was a curve there for sure. Now, I can't say that FDM doesn't lead the gateway to a lot of people getting into resin, but FDM is a very different model. Resin printing works against gravity. It uses a build plate that pushes down into a vat full of liquid that is then cured by certain means. And then once that is cured onto the build plate adequately, it then mechanisms itself up, prying itself away from the FEP sheet, and then continues this process until each layer has been cured. Now before I get into all this kind of stuff crazy with my slicer here that I'm showing you, let's rewind a bit. The types of UV resin printers that there are make a big difference on how the resin is cured. So in order to fully understand what type of printer you might want to get, I think it's important to understand what types of printers there are on the market. So let's take a look at the different printers on the market and see how they compare. The first type of printer we're going to talk about is the laser SLA. The laser SLA, or selective exposure to light by laser, uses a laser to pinpoint the accurate area that needs to be cured. It is said to be one of the most accurate forms of curing methods for resin printers. It's not widely available on the consumer market, and I think the printers are a little expensive for most people to own, but they are there if you look hard enough. The next type of printer is the DLP SLA, or selective exposure to light by projector. Now, this is probably one of the most accurate printers that a consumer can afford to buy for a reasonable amount of money. The DLP SLA system uses a projection of the image that is to be cured, and that projects it onto the screen area, which then cures it, and the build plate pulls it up. This is supposed to be a bit more accurate, as the projection should be more accurate than an LCD. The last version is MSLA, otherwise known as selective exposure to light by masked LCD. The masked LCD creates an image or block of everything other than the slice or 2D image of the actual projected 3D product. So the light is then blasted at the screen. The LCD creates a block or masking area, which then blocks out that light, minus maybe a little bit of a bleed there, demonstrated by my crude drawing, and that is what cures the layer by layer, and then the build plate pulls up away from the FEP, thus continuing the process. Now, as I explained before, the way that 3D resin printing works is the build plate pushes into the vat, and then that curing process happens, one of those types of curing processes as we just discussed there, and then you have that layer gets pulled up, and then the build plate comes back down, and then it repeats this process until it has completed all of the layers necessary for the end product. Now, we're going to get back to Peach here in just a moment, and by the way, this print is free, anyone can download it. She's available on, I believe, Thingiverse. I'm pretty sure you can grab her on My Mini Factory, where Printed Obsession usually hangs out. They make a lot of really cool models, and I had to pick up this one as well as Mario and Luigi. These were free as far as I saw. I don't think there was any paid for versions of them. They're really nice detail, really cool looking, so I'm looking forward to getting these prints up. Now, one of the things I do want to discuss as we look at this print, and I do want to talk about the fact that I am using Lychee Slicer here. So if you're not familiar with slicing software, there are actually a couple of different options for folks who are looking to get into 3D printing. And Lychee Slicer is one of the options that you do have. There are pro and premium versions of the software, and there's a free version of the software as well. There's also usually a slicer software that will come with your printer. In the case of Anycubic, they have Photon. If you're working with Elegoo, I believe there is a free version of G2Box. Pretty sure when you purchase the printer, you get like a trial or a certain amount of time with the software that is paid. I believe even Photon Slicer has a premium or pro version as well. I could be wrong there. And they just had a new version released too, which is supposed to have improved a lot of functionality. So for folks who do actually want to use the OEM software, there are some options for you to use. I'm simply demonstrating a process of prepping a file that happens to be using Lychee Slicer, which is my preferred slicing software. Now what I'm doing here is I'm orienting the file and I'm preparing it to be supported. But one of the things I want to do is I actually want to hollow this model. She's 140 plus millimeters tall, which makes her about 14 centimeters. This is a pretty tall piece. So I want to actually hollow out the bottom, put some holes in there, and then we're going to set up our internal supporting first. Then we're going to move on to island detections and stuff like that. And honestly, I'm not going to go through every step of this in this video because, as I said, slicing software differs and there are major differences between the way each one works. And so if you follow my tutorials and stuff about Lychee Slicer, you can learn all about how to support your own models, how to cut up models, slice models, do all kinds of fun stuff, hollow them. I go through a lot of the different steps of the process. Again, using Lychee Slicer as the tool. So if that's what you intend to use, by all means check out the rest of the channel and be sure to check out those videos because there's a lot of educational material there for folks that are looking to get into resin printing themselves. Now, meanwhile, guys, I'm going to go ahead and finish doing my fun work here that I like to do, prepping this, putting it together, supporting the model, and fleshing it out. Now we're going to speed this video up because this process can actually take quite some time if you're new to it, and it can take a lot of time if you're like me and you're very diligent about what your process is. So I am going to speed this up. The actual supporting work took me about an hour and 20 minutes, and I did actually edit a large portion of that out because, again, you can check out my other tutorials. It will go over how I support models, how I do that sort of stuff. That's not what this video is about. I wanted to explain to the new folks out there, all right, this is what resin printers are, this is the different types, this is how they work, and this is how they cure. Now, what I do want to explain, and I will explain this a little bit later on as I kind of finish up some of the support work that I'm doing, is how the resin printer creates its slices. You'll see at the end, and we'll go over this when I do the cutting or slicing at the very end, and we do the export file. I'm going to go over that with you guys and explain what's exactly happening there. Because what the printer has to do in order to understand what to do with it is it has to create 2D images of each layer of the object. So it's going to make a pass over each layer based on the layer height that you choose, or micron level, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to create a layer based on the amount of material that it's going to estimate that it needs to create for that layer. Now, depending on how many microns or layer height that you use, it is going to depend on the detail, depth, quality, and layer lines that you're going to see. There are also things like anti-aliasing that you can set up on the printer, on the slicing software that will negotiate with the printer essentially and try to do its best to kind of emulate that software, depending on the type of printer you're using, depending on its motherboard, depending on its systems. Like Qi2 systems work a little differently with aliasing than any Cubic products do. Those kind of work on their own thing. So if the program you're using, if the slicer you're using is not really set up to work with your printer, you may not get results at all. You may get mixed results or you may get poor results. And that really all depends on the type of machine you're using and the way you're going to use your anti-aliasing. And I do have a couple episodes where we've actually discussed that in different types of aliasing and the way that they work, and I have a couple of visual demonstrations now. So we're still working on that. Actually, I'm doing more field testing on the aliasing stuff. So if y'all are interested, check out the channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel because there's definitely a lot more content for folks that are looking to learn. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to add internal supports using Lychee's automatic internal support system. This is great if you have a hollowed object because this will save you some time. Now, I'm not saying it's going to do all of your supports for you and they're going to be great because you're going to probably want to go in there and tweak them. Now, again, this kind of depends on your level of expertise. If you're just starting doing this, you're probably going to rely on what the auto slicing and the auto generation is going to do for the programs. And for the most part, I found that a few of these pieces of software actually don't do a terrible job at auto supporting. As long as you remember that there's some rules. If it's a really big model, please hollow it out and put the drain holes in there. That's one thing about resin printing. You must have drain holes if you're using hollowing because there needs to be no vacuum. Remember, build plate into liquid. If there's a hollow, and there's no way for that air or liquid to escape, you're going to get a suction cup. It's going to pop every single time really hard off of that FEP sheet. And that eventually is going to break it, and then you're going to wind up with a bad time. So don't give yourself that nightmare, because I've heard of folks doing this where they actually literally will print a hollow model with no holes. And I'm not even sure how they survive, because honestly it should create such a large amount of suction that it shouldn't print. So I don't know. Again, don't do it. You need drain holes. You definitely need it. Watch my video on hollowing. I go through quite a lot of that. I talk about the holes there and where to put them, and how the hollowing works. I do 2D and 3D hollowing, because there's two ways to do it. So you have options. Also, another thing you can do is, as you saw me there tweaking my settings there just a second ago, you can create multiple resin profiles at different layer heights. And the handy thing for that is, if you use the island search feature like I do, it's a really cool way to go back and forth and check different island levels, with different layer heights, which is a neat little trick to kind of catch more islands, which is great because you want to catch all the islands you can. And again, like I said, an island is literally a piece of the model. To explain what an island is, it's literally a piece of model that forms in thin air. And since you're printing upside down and everything has to be connected, you need supports on it. So you need to draw supports to those islands in order to make sure that they survive the printing process. Because islands will just simply pop off into your FEP, then they will get pushed back down again by the build plate. They will eventually tear or put holes in your FEP, which could actually crack your screen, or your the glass screen projection area, whatever type of printer you're using, and that's going to give you a bad time. Again, we got to avoid the bad time, because a lot of people will get discouraged and they will stop doing 3D printing very quickly when they have bad first couple of runs. I know of quite a lot of folks that almost gave it up because they were just like, no, I'm done, I can't do it, this sucks. And so I think it's worth, checking out some of our other videos if you want to learn a bit more. But again, remember, there's some cardinal rules. Big models, hollow. Don't forget your drain holes. Definitely do your angles with the characters. Like if you're doing a humanoid, make sure that they're standing up. Don't lay them down. It's going to cause you to put a lot more supporting on places that are going to be sensitive to detail, and you want to make sure that you preserve your detail. It's actually one of the biggest things we try to do. Detail, and good supporting. Make sure the starting of the supporting is good. Make sure you have solid connections to the start points. Use a raft. That's a good way to make sure and preserve your prints. It's also good for removal because it gives you a nice piece to push off at the bottom with your spatula. Now, as you see here, I'm going to let this kind of go through the slice too. You'll see that 2D image as it draws each slice, and you'll see rendering at the top there. And then depending on the slice you're using, this is going to look a little different. But that 2D image is what your printer sees, to give you that final explanation there. Anyway, I hope this opened some doors for you folks that were looking into the world of 3D resin printing. I know this isn't the most verbose explanation of some of it, but I hope that some of the definitions and details that I gave you about how it works, the slicing kind of demonstration there, I know this is only one piece of many softwares that you can use for this job, and I do respect and appreciate that there are tons of options out there, so don't have to use what I use. Again, if you're interested in learning more about Lychee Slicer, you can check them out on mango3d.io, I believe is their website. I'll double check that and put the correct link in the description if I messed that up. And there are other softwares, like I said. There's Chi2Box, which I believe is, I believe it's just chi2box.com. I don't know. You'll have to Google search that one. And there's a couple other ones you can use. Prusa Slicer. Like I said, there are options out there. Anyway, that is all for this episode. I truly appreciate everyone who watches our channel as we are reaching nearly 500 subscribers. Couldn't have done it without you guys. Thanks so much for all the support and love. We always do appreciate it. And again, we hope to see you all soon, and we hope to see some new subscribers that maybe want to learn some new things about what we do. Take care all.